On the day I took my last breath, my husband the Emperor was thousands of miles away, closing the eyes of my younger sister. I had been the Empress of Dung Yuan for 30 years, but only on my deathbed did I learn that he had hated me for those entire 30 years. All because Dung Yuan was born with a speech delay, yet when I first met him at age 6, he opened his mouth and called me little sister. The Empress was overjoyed. She brought me into the palace to be his daily companion. When I came of age, the Empress granted me one wish. I knelt and kowtowed before her. I wished to marry Yuan. And so, I became his Empress for 30 years. We lived as a loving husband and wife, never apart. Only when illness left me bedridden did he travel all the way to Jiangnan to personally close the eyes of another woman. When he returned, his gaze toward me was filled with resentment. If you hadn't used your favor to force me into repaying your kindness, I would never have missed out on Qingli. The fire on New Year's Eve, Qingli was the one who carried me out. You had grace toward me, and Tonglu also had grace toward me. Qingli was my younger sister. That year, when I entered the palace, because I was afraid of strangers, my mother told her to accompany me. But on that New Year's Eve night, the one who carried him out of the sea of flames was me. Reborn into this life, I was once again kneeling in front of the Empress. I heard her smile and ask, "What do you wish for?" I bowed and kowtowed. This humble girl has been away from home for too long. My family has already arranged a marriage for me, and they are urging me to return quickly. The Empress looked up at me in surprise. I thought you very much wanted to become the crown princess. Seeing the two of you together every day, how could I not understand? During the coming-of-age ceremony, he even gave you that jade hairpin. It was a special one he had ordered made all the way in Yangzhou. I kept my head down, my tone calm. The crown prince only sees me as a little sister. The affection between us runs very deep as siblings. He is straightforward and sincere. How could I possibly mistake brotherly love for romantic feelings? Dung Yuan was born with delayed development. The imperial physicians had tried countless methods and poured countless bitter medicines into him, but he still refused to speak. The emperor's initial expectations gradually turned into disappointment, until finally he simply stopped caring or asking about him anymore. On the night of the mid-autumn banquet that year, my father brought the whole family back to the capital to report on his duties and received the grace to attend the palace banquet. When I was little and didn't understand things, while the adults were talking, I pulled my maid and ran toward the lotus pond to feed the fish. I had no idea that the Empress and Dung Yuan were both by the lotus pond. Late autumn, the flowers had withered. Dung Yuan stood beside the Empress. The 7-year-old youth had a somewhat cold and indifferent expression. When he saw me, he directly opened his mouth and called, "Little sister." The Empress was ecstatic, immediately grabbing my hand and insisting I stay in the palace. At that time I was only 4 years old. I cried whenever I didn't see my mother, so how could I agree? The Empress then granted grace, allowing me to choose one sister to live with me. I brought my younger sister Qingli. She was 1 year younger than me, gentle in temperament, obedient and sensible. For the next 13 years, Dung Yuan and I were together every day. He learned to speak word by word, through my laughter and teasing. When the emperor saw him gradually becoming fluent, he began to entrust him with power. No one in the great hall dared to look down on this crown prince, who once could not speak anymore. At 14 years old, on New Year's Eve, the imperial palace caught fire. Flames soared into the sky, and black smoke billowed. Dung Yuan was overcome by smoke, and fainted in his sleeping chamber. I don't know where I found the strength, but I risked my life dragging him out of the sea of flames, and staggered outside. But after he woke up, what he saw was the burned scar on the back of Qingli's hand, and he mistook it for mine. I didn't understand from what moment he had changed his heart toward Qingli. The little boy, who used to obediently call me Jiao Jiao, began quietly following my younger sister with his eyes. Not long after the coming-of-age ceremony, the Empress asked for my opinion. I said I wanted to marry the crown prince. Qingli was then sent back to her hometown in Ruzhou. Afterward she married in the countryside, and was wedded into Jiangnan. I prepared a very generous dowry for her, as a token of our many years of sisterly bond. For the next 30 years, Dung Yuan and I loved each other, without any suspicion. He was attentive, respectful, and caring toward me, like the most perfect husband in the world. Until I lay bedridden, growing weaker day by day. He then secretly left the palace and rushed to Jiangnan, specifically to close Qingli's eyes. When he returned, his face was full of resentment, and his previous attitude completely vanished. If it weren't for the fact that you had once saved my life and forced me to repay the debt, how could I have missed out on Qingli? The fire that year, Qingli was the one who carried me out. You saved my life. Qingli also saved my life. I moved my lips, wanting to tell him that I had no scar at all, and that the one who saved him in the great fire that year was me. Qingli's wound was only from a burning piece of wood falling on her, while she was already outside the sea of flames. But I had no strength left. In my final moments, I used the last bit of energy to try to speak, but death came too quickly. Those words never left my lips, before my eyes closed forever. The Empress did not obstruct me, and bestowed plenty of gold, silver, and treasures. I kowtowed in thanks. When I returned to my room, Qingli was standing there, wanting to speak, but hesitating, refusing to leave for a long time. Her face flushed red. Finally she spoke, "Elder sister." I was stunned, and didn't reply. Qingli lowered her head, her voice growing smaller and smaller. The crown prince came to persuade me to stay. He said if I left, he would lose one person who understands him. Elder sister, I don't want to return to my hometown in Ruzhou anymore. I come from a humble background. What can I do if I go back to Ruzhou? There aren't many good men there, and even the few outstanding ones won't choose me. Elder sister, I hope to stay. I hope I can fight for a good future for myself. Although she was a concubine-born daughter, my father had never planned to use her for political marriages with powerful officials. In my previous life, after Qingli returned to Ruzhou, my mother wrote complaining that there were too few talented young men locally, making it hard to find a suitable match for her, so she arranged a good marriage for her in Jiangnan. It was the Wu family, a household with few people, clean family background, and a gentle mother-in-law. Once Qingli married in, she could directly manage the household, and would undoubtedly become the main wife and matriarch. It couldn't be better. It was just that no matter how good it was, it still wasn't perfect. If you want to stay, then stay. Qingli was stunned for a moment, then her eyes reddened. She ran over, grabbed my hand, and tears streamed down. Elder sister, at first it was me who shouldn't have had other thoughts when you brought me into the palace. I shouldn't have secretly liked the crown prince. All these years I only dared to hide this feeling in my heart, and never let anyone know. I originally thought that elder sister also liked the crown prince, so I didn't dare mention it or compete. I only hoped to watch him from afar. She sobbed once, and wiped the tears from her face. But now elder sister is about to leave the palace and return to Rougeau. Finally I can openly like him. Only then did I understand that Qingli also liked Deng Yuan. In my previous life I had truly been too foolish, satisfying my own selfish desires, and harming all three of us. I had thought it was fate's arrangement, never knowing it was me who had torn them apart. Thank you, elder sister, for fulfilling my wish. She was so excited her whole body trembled. I said nothing, and reached up to pull the hairpin from my hair. It was the coming-of-age gift Deng Yuan had given me. On top was a tiny carved pear blossom that looked lifelike. But I didn't like pear blossoms. That day when he handed it to me his expression had been stiff, as if feeling something was off. The servants must have grabbed the wrong box by mistake. That hairpin had originally been prepared for Qingli, the Li in her name. A jade pear blossom hairpin in her hair would have been perfect in every way, and had nothing to do with me. At the time he had no choice, and simply shoved it into my hand. I handed the hairpin over. Qingli, I have no feelings for the crown prince. This hairpin is for you. She accepted it, with both hands, and burst into laughter. The day I left the palace, the sky was overcast, and the last chill of late autumn grew heavier. Qingli had run over early in the morning, her eyes slightly red. She held my hand tightly, unwilling to let go. Deng Yuan also came. He stood in the cold wind, with a faint look of relief on his face, even carrying a hint of secret joy. Deng Yuan walked to Qingli's side, draped a specially prepared cloak over her shoulders, then took out a hand warmer from somewhere and pressed it into her hands, murmuring instructions in a low voice. Qingli kept her head lowered, the tips of her ears flushed red, nodding gently. That undisguised joy struck me speechless for a moment. In my previous life he had also been this attentive to me. But later, without knowing when, he would prepare two of everything, one portion for me, and one for Qingli. I loved him with my whole heart and soul, while he used me, and conveniently took care of my sister at the same time, even secretly feeling pleased about it, thinking himself generous and caring. But from the very beginning he had actually found Qingli quite annoying. He disliked her weak and fragile personality, how she cried at the slightest thing. He found her troublesome, timid, afraid of everything. Even a small fish could startle her. Being with her was boring. He even blamed me for always helping her, saying I was spoiling her and letting her become more and more unreasonable. Yet he still prepared 2 cloaks, 2 hand warmers, and even paired lanterns for the mid-autumn festival. Qingli looked reluctant to part. Elder sister, have a safe journey. Please send my regards to father and mother. And to elder brother and sister-in-law. She rambled on, and finally handed me a bulging bundle. I've prepared gifts for everyone at home. Elder sister, please help me bring them back. I took the bundle and nodded. Deng Yuan stood a few steps away, and said softly, visiting family in your hometown doesn't require leaving in such a hurry. Didn't you always stay a few days, before returning to the palace before? How many days do you plan to stay this time? Will you make it back in time for the mid-autumn banquet? The Empress Dowager said they found a southern opera troupe this year. You like listening to opera the most. The corner of my mouth twitched slightly. I replied politely, this time when I return home, I will not be coming back. Everything around seemed to fall silent for a second. Deng Yuan's expression froze. I didn't look at him again, turned, and stepped into the carriage. The moment the curtain fell, I heard the conversation from behind. Elder sister is not just going back for a short stay this time. Qingli's voice was gentle and sweet. Elder sister said she really misses father and mother and has already asked the Empress for permission to leave permanently. Your Highness the Crown Prince, have you heard? After a moment of silence, Deng Yuan's voice came. I didn't know. She stays in the palace almost year-round, and rarely goes home. It's good. The carriage started moving slowly. The house looked no different from before. Every corner was familiar, yet it felt strangely alien. My sister-in-law came out to the gate to welcome me. The moment she saw me her eyes reddened. She grabbed my hand, looking me up and down, muttering non-stop that I had gotten thinner. Beside her was a chubby little boy following along. It was Sunner, only 3 years old, and at his most mischievous stage. His plump body looked like a little calf. When he saw me he wasn't afraid of strangers at all. He spread his chubby arms and threw himself at me, demanding to be carried. I bent down and picked him up. A milky scent rushed into my nose. Mother watched from the side, smiling so widely her mouth couldn't close. Once you're married, you can have a plump little boy, or a little girl, who looks like you. I will personally raise them for you. I smiled and said nothing. In my previous life I had also given birth to a little boy, fair-skinned and plump, who looked very much like Deng Yuan. Unfortunately he died before he was even a month old. Those days I cried, until my tears ran dry. Later investigation revealed that a newly entered concubine had secretly poisoned him. Deng Yuan was furious, and threw her into the cold palace, along with her entire family. But what was the use? The child would never come back. This left a shadow in my heart. After that, even when I became pregnant I couldn't keep any of them. One after another, they were lost. In contrast, after Qingli married far away in Jiangnan she gave birth to 3 sons, and 1 daughter in succession. Every time news reached the capital, I was half happy for her, and half envious. Deng Yuan was afraid I would feel bad, and always prepared generous gifts to send over, never letting me worry. I put Sunner down. My sister-in-law instructed the maids to take him away. I stayed home resting for several days, not wanting to do anything, even too lazy to speak. Mother reminded me several times. Her aged eyes were full of vicissitudes, as if she had seen through the mortal world. There was no trace of a young lady's vitality left in her. She regretted it deeply, and kept saying she should not have let me stay in the imperial palace back then, turning me into a suffering old woman. My sister-in-law didn't like hearing this, and dragged me out. Staying cooped up in the room all day is suffocating. Let's go stroll the streets. The streets were bustling with people. The aroma of various snacks wafted over in waves. The variety made my mouth water. The calls of street vendors never stopped. I was in a daze, when suddenly I heard soft sobbing nearby. Following the sound across the bridge, I saw a little girl squatting by the roadside, holding a flower basket, crying until her face was red. She probably couldn't sell her flowers, and was anxious. Just as I was about to step forward, someone else reached out first. Those long, slender fingers held a large piece of silver, and offered it to the little girl. "Don't cry. I'll buy these flowers." The little girl was stunned, then turned from sadness to joy. She casually wiped her face, and hurriedly handed over the flowers. I was about to turn away, when my sister-in-law suddenly stopped, speaking in great surprise. "Madame Jiang, hello." The young gentleman turned around, and nodded slightly. My sister-in-law smiled. "Young Master Song has returned?" He replied that he had just arrived in the capital today. His gaze swept over me, extremely refined and courteous. My sister-in-law's eyes twinkled. She enthusiastically continued, "What a coincidence. My second sister has also just returned home." As she spoke, she winked at me. The Song family? My heart skipped a beat. A few days ago my mother had written mentioning that they had arranged a marriage for me in Ruzhou with the Song family. Could it really be such a coincidence? My sister-in-law seemed to notice my hesitation, and cheerfully added, "These are young Master Song's flowers." Song Yenxian looked at the fresh bouquet in his arms, selected a few branches of crepe myrtle, and offered them to me. For a second, young Mississippi. Crepe myrtle, what a coincidence. It was my favorite flower. On the way home, my eldest sister-in-law linked arms with me and chattered non-stop. That was the grandson of Grand Tutor Song Yenxian. The old gentleman is advanced in age. After retiring, he settled in Ruzhou, very close to us. Young Master Song previously made a long trip specifically to find medicine for his elder. The old man's health wasn't good. Thankfully, he is filial. In a while, he will be taking the imperial examinations. It said he is exceptionally talented. Passing with flying colors is practically guaranteed. She blinked at me. They had originally planned to wait for a formal meeting, but today they happened to run into each other on the street. I vaguely remembered that something similar had happened in my previous life. Mother had written urging me to go meet him quickly, praising the Song family endlessly, as a rare good family, with the grand tutor, who had taught students all over the world. Song Yenxian was also dignified and handsome. But at the time my head was full of Deng Yuan. I hadn't even finished reading the letter, before tossing it aside, and replying that I didn't want to. Later, Song Yenxian passed the imperial examinations as the top scholar. On the day the palace announced the results, the entire capital was talking about how handsome and erudite this new top scholar was. Even Deng Yuan had praised him, saying his essays were profound and insightful, unlike others who only talked big. At the palace banquet I had seen him, from afar a few times. He sat properly among the rows, elegant in every gesture. Whenever his gaze swept toward me, he would quietly look away. As soon as I stepped through the door, Mother, having heard that I had coincidentally met Song Yenxian, lit up. "How was he?" she asked carefully, afraid of upsetting me. After thinking for a moment I said truthfully, "He is a true gentleman. Someone raised by the grand tutor is definitely outstanding." Mother was overjoyed, and immediately began arranging a formal meeting. On the day we met, Song Yenxian brought gifts. He was proper and considerate without making me feel distant. He was truly upright and honest, with no hint of frivolity in his words or actions. He asked what I liked, and what I usually did to pass the time, listening attentively. We grew familiar after a few exchanges. He always took great care of my feelings, and never let me feel tense or uncomfortable. Somehow he found out I loved crepe myrtle flowers. After that, every time he visited he would bring a fresh bouquet of crepe myrtle, as if just picked from the branches. Because of this my elder brother had to sleep in the study for several nights. My sister-in-law teased him about it, saying Song Yenxian's flower gifts every time caused her to scold my brother. "Look at how he treats her." My brother grumbled, "That guy made me suffer." Then he was chased out of the bedroom by my sister-in-law. I couldn't help laughing. My brother rolled his eyes beside me. "If Song Yenxian doesn't stop, I'm going to settle accounts with him." Sometime later, Song Yenxian sent over a gift box. I opened it. It was a hairpin in the shape of a crepe myrtle flower. I held it for a long time, touched beyond words. He stood to the side, his voice gentle, with a trace of nervousness. When second young Miss came of age, I was in the capital. Although we didn't know each other then, I saw you, from afar a few times later, and always felt that crepe myrtle suited you best. Pear blossoms, on the other hand, seemed to lack a bit of charm. My hand holding the hairpin paused. Without realizing it, he understood me even better than Deng Yuan. That day Song Yenxian escorted me home. As the carriage stopped, he got down first, and gently helped me alight. I lowered my head and stepped down, Just as I was about to bid him farewell, from the corner of my eye I saw another carriage parked outside the main gate. The curtain was lifted. Deng Yuan jumped down first, then turned to help the person inside. Qingli appeared, supported by both his hands, as she lightly stepped down. Between her brows was still that fragile, pitiable look. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes immediately brightened. Elder sister. Qingli rushed over and grabbed my hand tightly. Elder sister, ever since you left, I haven't had anyone to talk to. His Highness the Crown Prince is too busy with official duties and has no free time every day. I wanted to find someone to confide in, but didn't know who. I was feeling very down, so His Highness said he would bring me back to the residence for a few days to relieve my boredom. As she spoke, she glanced back at Deng Yuan with a shy face. Deng Yuan slowly walked over. His gaze swept across me and immediately landed on Song Yanxian, who was standing half a step behind me. He narrowed his eyes slightly, his tone somewhat suppressed. Yanxian, what are you doing here? Song Yanxian cupped his hands in greeting, calm and composed. Your Highness, this subject returned to the capital a month ago. I gathered all the medicine my grandfather needed, and didn't dare delay, so I hurried back to Ruzhou overnight. Deng Yuan nodded, evaluated him once more, then looked at me, and asked casually, why are you here? I almost forgot. The Grand Tutor and the Jiang family have been old friends for a long time. Ruzhou is a big city. It's normal for the two families to visit each other. Qingli seemed to sense something. She walked to Deng Yuan's side and said softly, Your Highness, let's go inside first. It's windy out here. Be careful not to catch a cold. Deng Yuan looked at her, his eyes softening a little, and nodded. All right. He turned to Song Yanxian. Let's meet another day. Song Yanxian nodded slightly. Very well. I bowed slightly to Song Yanxian, said nothing more, and walked through the main gate. The maids led Deng Yuan to the guest courtyard. Although called a guest courtyard, it was actually a separate compound in the eastern part, some distance from where I stayed. Normally we wouldn't run into each other, but the Jiang residence wasn't that large. What if we did meet? I made up my mind not to step out of my room. The maids asked what I wanted to eat, or if I wanted to go out. I shook my head at everything. Who knew he would come without being invited? One afternoon I was leaning by the window reading a novel Song Yanxian had given me, when I suddenly heard footsteps outside the courtyard. Before I could stand up, the curtain was lifted by a hand. Deng Yuan stood at the entrance looking somewhat surprised. His gaze swept across the crepe myrtle hairpin in my hair and paused. Ah, Jiao. Your complexion looks much better since returning home. I didn't respond. I stood straight and took a step back. Your Highness the Crown Prince came to find Qingli. Her courtyard is not on this side. It's in the Li courtyard to the east. I'll call a maid to show you the way. He nodded slightly. Just as he turned to leave, his footsteps suddenly halted. The heavy curtain fell behind him, half covering, half revealing. Ah, Jiao, why don't you call me Brother Deng anymore? I've grown up, and must observe proper etiquette. Otherwise when I return I'll be scolded by mother again. She always nagged that these past few years in the palace I didn't learn proper manners well. Now that I'm home, I must start over from the beginning. Deng Yuan was very unaccustomed to my coldness, and was about to ask more, when Qingli happened to walk into the courtyard. Seeing Deng Yuan standing in my courtyard, panic flashed in her eyes. Your Highness, why are you here? Deng Yuan raised his hand, and lovingly flicked her nose. I accidentally went the wrong way. The layout here is similar to the guest courtyard. I wasn't paying enough attention earlier. Only then did Qingli relax. The corners of her eyes curved sweetly, as she carefully tugged his sleeve. Your Highness, this is your first time in Ruzhou. Let me show you around. There's a famous osmanthus cake shop on the street, whose flavor is even better than in the capital. Deng Yuan nodded, and allowed her to pull him outside. Mother heard the news, that Qingli was about to marry the crown prince, and was stunned for a long time. Your father once said he didn't hope for you children to marry too well. Marrying too well can easily lead to being ostracized. Our family is far away in Ruzhou, separated by mountains and rivers. Even if we wanted to help, we couldn't. But this fate is really too good. It's the imperial family. In the future, if she suffer, you can only swallow it alone. You won't even have a family member to talk to. I also heard people say the crown prince wants to marry Qingli as the principal consort, but how can the position of principal wife be given to a concubine-born daughter? The Empress doesn't agree, and says she can only enter as a side consort. Neither side yields, so they're stuck like this. Qingli herself doesn't say a word. I don't know what she's thinking inside. I stayed silent on the side. What did any of this have to do with me? My sister-in-law probably noticed I was in low spirits, and took me out the next day. She mentioned that the Lu family's garden in eastern Ruzhou was holding a flower appreciation gathering, and had invited many guests. It was a good chance to learn something, so I couldn't refuse her kindness. I changed into a different outfit, and went out with her. The banquet was crowded and lively. I found a quiet spot to rest, and watched the carp competing for food in the pond. My sister-in-law was pulled away by acquaintances to chat. Before leaving she reminded me not to wander off. I was watching intently, when I suddenly heard a familiar voice, from not far away. I wonder which young lady has caught your eye? I instinctively turned, and used a pillar to hide myself. Through the green bamboo, I saw Deng Yuan and Song Yanxian standing side by side under the corridor. Deng Yuan was leisurely fanning himself with a folding fan, his gaze falling on the object in Song Yanxian's hand. It was a pair of jade interlocking rings, lustrous and white, made of precious jade. He leaned closer to examine it for a while, then smiled outwardly but not inwardly. These jade interlocking rings must be the work of Master Gu. I've seen several of his pieces in the palace. They look exactly like this one. That old man doesn't give them away casually. Yanxian, you really have face. Song Yanxian's ears quietly turned red. His fingers gently stroked the edge of the jade rings. When gifting to the person in my heart, I naturally have to choose the finest. Deng Yuan's gaze lingered on the jade rings for another moment. I once knew a little girl, who also liked solving jade interlocking rings. But she had a bad temper. Every time she couldn't solve it she would pout, and run to pester me, acting spoiled and using every trick. His finger lightly touched a certain spot on the rings. This carving here is a Jiao character. Jiao. Could it be Zhang Jiao? My palms suddenly trembled, and my back ran cold. Just then a maid hurried over, panting. Your Highness the Crown Prince, third young Miss Jiang accidentally sprained her ankle, and is looking for you. The smile on Deng Yuan's face vanished instantly. He frowned, turned, and strode away. I followed slowly, and saw he had already half-lifted Qing Li. She leaned against his chest, eyes red, one foot raised, and not daring to touch the ground. Deng Yuan held her shoulder, with one arm, and pointed straight at the young lady opposite. You pushed her. The young lady's face flushed with embarrassment. Her lips trembled, as she waved her hands frantically. I didn't push her at all. I only said one sentence. That the scar on her hand looked a bit scary. Like it was burned by a branch. Then she got angry, tried to leave on her own, and accidentally sprained her ankle. It's my fault. I shouldn't have said that. I apologize. Deng Yuan was stunned. A branch? The young lady nodded desperately. Yes. That long thin shape. Isn't it a branch? When I was young I also played with fire, so of course I recognize it. Qing Li nestled in Deng Yuan's arms, sobbing. She also said that with this scar left on me, I'm afraid I won't be able to marry. Did you really think that? My heart sank. Deng Yuan stood there dazed, then slowly raised his eyes from the crowd and looked toward me. I calmly averted my gaze. He stared at me for a while, then heard Qing Li cry out in pain again. He immediately looked away, picked her up, and strode toward the guest room. The doctor arrived quickly. Fortunately no tendons or bones were injured. A few days of rest and she'll be fine. I waited until everyone had left before walking to the door of the guest room. Just as I was about to push the door open, Deng Yuan's voice came from inside. Qing Li, I think I've never asked you, where exactly did the wound on the back of your hand come from? My footsteps halted. That year on New Year's Eve, when the palace caught fire, I was trying to avoid the flames, and accidentally got hit by a burning branch. It hurt so much I cried for a long time. It was just a branch? Deng Yuan's voice carried no emotion. Yes, I'm afraid of fire. My legs went weak, with fear at the time. How could I have dared rush into the big fire? On the other hand, elder sister, I don't know where she went that day. When she came back a small section of her hair had been burned by the fire. She said she nearly ruined her face. It was terrifying. The room fell silent again. I sighed quietly in my heart. The words I hadn't managed to say on my deathbed in the previous life were now spoken. Through Qing Li's mouth. Fate really likes to play tricks on people. I turned and left. On the other side of the corridor, Song Yanxian was still standing in the same spot. When he saw me coming he finally relaxed. Is third young miss alright? She's fine. He didn't ask more. Simply handed me the box in his hand. Jiao Jiao, take this and play with it. I opened it. It was the jade interlocking rings. You're thoughtful. Thank you. Song Yanxian's face instantly flushed red. His throat moved a few times. Before he finally managed. It's nothing. Tom Lo was recuperating in her room. During these days Deng Yuan never once came to visit her. I saw him, from afar a few times. Standing with his hands behind his back under the corridor. Deep in thought about something. Whenever I spotted him I quickly avoided him, being very understanding. Who would have thought he would take the initiative to approach? One afternoon, I had just come out of my mother's room, and turned the corner, when I found him blocking the entrance to my courtyard. I stopped, looked up at him. Your Highness the Crown Prince got lost again this time? He stared at me, without blinking, not moving aside. No. After a long, while Deng Yuan finally spoke again. During the fire in the main hall, that year, where were you? My hand hidden in my sleeve clenched tightly. He had only asked this question, after 2 lifetimes, but it was already too late. I didn't want to argue with him anymore. I was too lazy to debate what really happened. And I didn't want him to understand. What if he knew? Could he make up for those 30 years? No, he couldn't. At that time I was in the Pear Blossom Palace. That side also caught fire. While escaping I accidentally burned a bit of my hair, and nearly ruined my face. He kept staring at me, seeming somewhat suspicious. Your Highness, why are you suddenly asking about these things? I looked straight into his eyes, pretending not to understand. He stood there dazed for a while, then shook his head. Nothing. I thought he was about to leave. So I shifted to give him space. Unexpectedly he didn't move. Instead he said something unrelated. Young Master Song is extremely talented in his studies. This time when he takes the exam he will definitely make the golden list. I suppose Grand Tutor also doesn't want trivial matters to distract him. These words were clearly a warning to me. assuming I had feelings for Song Yanxian, and worrying that, because of me, his future would be delayed, and he would fail the exam. He glanced at me once more, said nothing else, and turned to leave. That night I tossed and turned for a long time, before finally sending a letter to Song Yanxian. On the morning of the 4th day we met at a tea house. Young Master Song, perhaps we should postpone the wedding. Song Yanxian had just lifted his teacup for a sip, and choked violently. He hurriedly set it down, flustered. Did I do something wrong? I quickly waved my hands. No. Then why? Song Yanxian stared at me, looking utterly panicked. After thinking for a while I spoke my true feelings. What if because of me your exam is delayed? And you fail? I don't want to drag you down. He was stunned for a moment, then breathed a sigh of relief. A smile appeared in his eyes. I am very confident in my learning. If I fail, it's because my foundation is too weak, and my knowledge too shallow. It can't be blamed on anyone else, and certainly not on you. Moreover, you are not a burden to me at all. He was instantly reassured. Good. Song Yanxian hesitated for a moment, then asked carefully, as for the wedding, it's still the same. His eyes immediately brightened, unable to hide the joy at the corners of his mouth. The next day Deng Yuan left. When Qingli learned he was returning to the capital, she hurriedly packed her things, limped out, and said with red eyes, Your Highness, let me return with you. Deng Yuan glanced at her. Your foot injury hasn't healed yet. It's inconvenient to travel. Besides, didn't you say you missed your family? Stay home with your parents. Before Qingli could say more, Deng Yuan had already mounted his horse. On the day of the wedding, as soon as Song Yanxian arrived, my elder brother blocked the main gate. Who told this brat to give flowers every day, and make me suffer in the study for half a month? So he deliberately posed 3 difficult couplets, determined to teach the groom, who was stealing his sister, a lesson. Unexpectedly, Song Yanxian remained calm and confident, answering fluently like flowing water, and displaying his talent effortlessly, earning admiration from the onlookers. The smile on my brother's face instantly froze. In the end he could only mutter helplessly, This groom really has some real skill. The crowd grew even more amazed. My brother regretted it, but my sister-in-law came up behind him, and pinched his waist hard. He gritted his teeth in pain, but didn't dare cry out. When it was time to bow in the hall, and enter the bridal chamber, red candles flickered. Song Yanxian lifted the red veil of the bride, with trembling fingers. He gazed at me, with deep affection, never blinking, and solemnly held my hand. Jiao, right now I haven't yet passed the examinations, and earned official rank, so I can't give you many promises. But please believe, that in the future I will definitely win glory, and favor for you. Looking into his sincere eyes, my heart was filled with sweetness. Alright, I'll wait for you. Life after marriage was stable and comfortable. The Song family was small. The grand tutor was very kind, and treated me like his own granddaughter. During the day I read by the window, or painted when tired. Song Yanxian worried I would be bored, and specially had a pond dug in the rear garden, channeling clear spring water into it and stocking it with colorful carp. I often leaned over the railing, watching for half a day at a time. One day I returned to the Jiang residence, with Song Yanxian. Mother pulled me aside and asked concernedly. I answered truthfully, that the Song family treated me very well, and Song Yanxian was obedient in every way. Mother smiled brightly. Finally I can rest easy. Then I noticed Qingli standing quietly to the side. She had become much thinner. The corners of her mouth carried a smile, but her eyes were full of envy and loneliness. When we were alone in the room, she finally burst into tears. Elder sister, I really envy you so much. After His Highness left there was no news at all. My heart feels so wronged, and I haven't received any reply. Does he hate me now? Does he not want me back in the palace anymore? Qingli looked at me, with tearful eyes, full of panic. It's all my fault. The Empress clearly told me to be a side consort, but the Crown Prince insisted on making me the principal consort. I shouldn't have made things difficult for him. Actually being a side consort is fine. As long as he cares for me, I don't care about status at all. I took out a handkerchief, and gently wiped her tears. I had intended to say a few comforting words, but in the end I didn't know what to say. Deng Yuan had grown suspicious, and realized the person who saved him that year was someone else. But what exactly had Qingli done wrong? In both lives, he had never seriously asked which of us had actually saved him. Seeing the scar on Qingli's hand, he simply decided she was the lifesaver. Did he like the person, or did he like the scar? Whoever had the scar on their hand, he would like that person. If the scar was on someone's hand, his heart would go to that person. Such affection was truly too capricious and superficial. Qingli sobbed in pain for a long time, before slowly stopping. Elder sister, when you came back to visit, I shouldn't have dragged you into feeling bad. Go on over quickly. Your husband is still waiting for you in the front hall. She forced a smile that looked even uglier than crying. I looked at her quietly, my heart aching. After hesitating for a long time, I finally took her hand. I had made a decision. I've never told you this before. She looked at me in confusion. I told her everything that had happened that New Year's Eve night, detail by detail. Qingli froze completely. She sat down on the floor in a daze, unable to recover for a long time. So it could be like this. So the reason the crown prince suddenly changed how he looked at me was because he thought I was the one who saved his life. He didn't even ask any question and just assumed it was true. Could this be the reason he said he wanted to marry me? I remained silent. She held back her tears and sighed. I even thought he had finally noticed my existence. Before, when you and him chatted and laughed, I was always watching from the side. I'm genuinely, incredibly jealous. I hoped that one day he would treat me gently too, even just a little bit. I smiled bitterly inside, my mouth tasting sour. Who would have thought that little bit of gentleness was fake? But if he only liked me because of a scar, how long could such affection last? Today I have a scar on my hand, so he likes me. Tomorrow if someone else has a scar and claims to be the lifesaver, won't he immediately turn around and like them instead? I didn't expect her to think it through so clearly. In my previous life, Dong Yuan had been considered a wise ruler. He governed the realm prosperously, and both court and country were clean and upright. In the harem, besides me who never gave birth to any children, he had 7 sons and 3 daughters in total. He treated the concubines, who bore him children, with respect, fair to all, never showing favoritism. Dong Yuan loved everyone. It was just that the amount of love each person received differed. Once Qingli thought it through, her eyes filled with relief. Thank goodness I never became his consort. Whether side consort or crown prince consort, I originally thought that if he liked me, I would give everything to repay him, and not let this affection go to waste. But now it seems his affection isn't even worth my response. She turned and asked me, elder sister, he will definitely investigate the truth. What about you? I had already married someone else. I had nothing more to do with him. The past had been turned over, and this life had just begun. The next day, Qingli went to the main courtyard and knelt before Mother. Mother, you also helped me find a good marriage. You thought it through? Mother tentatively brought it up. It was understandable. Qingli's birth mother had been Mother's personal maid. From a young age she had followed Mother, obedient and well-behaved, never speaking out of turn. Mother saw that, although she was a servant, there was sisterly affection, and later took her as a concubine. She lived quietly without making trouble. Unfortunately, during childbirth she suffered heavy bleeding, and neither mother nor child survived. Qingli was the only bloodline her birth mother left behind. Mother pitied her for losing her mother young, and raised her as her own daughter. Daily expenses were never skimped on. Although Qingli was concubine-born, no one in the residence ever treated her as inferior. Yet she always considered herself half a step lower, because of her status. Others didn't look down on her, but she looked down on herself first. Now that she said she wanted to choose a husband, Mother was both surprised and delighted. Just like in my previous life, Mother carefully selected for several days, and finally settled on that Wu family in Jiangnan. Qingli agreed immediately after hearing it. Good, let's go with that family. The imperial examinations were approaching, so Song Yanxian and I headed to the capital. He rented a courtyard to study, and I stayed beside him grinding ink and trimming paper. Life passed plainly and peacefully. After arriving in the capital, I heard some news. The Empress had chosen a principal consort for the crown prince, the daughter of an official, who had supposedly saved the crown prince's life during the fire. The Empress, wanting to repay the grace, did everything to facilitate the marriage. Hearing this, my heart didn't stir at all. On the day the imperial decree was issued, the whole city was discussing it. No one expected the crown prince to openly defy the decree. He stood in the Golden Hall, before the civil and military officials, and asked the prospective crown princess exactly where she had been, and how she had saved him that day. The young lady stammered, with many inconsistencies, and ultimately couldn't give a clear account. The marriage was cancelled because of this. Rumors spread among the common people. Some said the crown prince was too calculating. Some guessed the young lady was a fake, and others said the crown prince already had someone in his heart, and was just using this as an excuse. I closed the door tightly, neither listening to, nor caring about the gossip. After this storm finally calmed, the golden list for the autumn examinations was released. Song Yanxian had passed as the top scholar. I personally cooked a table of dishes waiting for him to come home. There was a knock at the door. I stood up to greet him, but the person standing outside was not Song Yanxian. Dong Yuan's eyes were fixed on the married woman's bun in my hair. His body trembled, and he staggered half a step back, steadying himself against the doorframe. Jiao Jiao, when did you get married? I wrote you a letter, why didn't you reply? I had never seen any letter. But even if I had received it I wouldn't have replied. It was probably intercepted by the Empress. His voice was hoarse, full of unwillingness. I took a step back. 3 months ago. Considering the long distance, I didn't send wedding sweets to your highness the crown prince. He forced a smile that looked even more miserable than crying. No need. Today in the palace Song Yanxian already stuffed some into my hands. Dong Yuan struggled to control himself. I never imagined the two of you could really end up together. I didn't answer. When he spoke again, his tone was pained and frustrated. After I returned to the palace I investigated for half a day. That day there was no one staying in the Pear Blossom Palace at all. Jiao Jiao, you were the one who saved me, weren't you? Why did you hide it from me? There was no longer any point in hiding it. In both lives, circling around, the truth finally had to be faced clearly. Your highness never asked. You saw the wound on Tan Li's hand, and decided she was the lifesaver. I saved you, without expecting repayment, and never thought of using that grace to demand any benefits. His eyes reddened. In the previous life you didn't have time to mention it. Why in this life did you still dryly watch me like someone else? I was stunned for a moment, then laughed coldly. He knew I had also been reborn. Dung Yuan, when you admire someone, is it just whoever saved your life, that you go and love? If on that New Year's Eve it had been me, who saved you, then you would have liked me. So if later someone else saves you, will you go, and like them too? Is your affection so casually thrown around? His face gradually turned deathly pale. In my previous life I was your Empress for 30 years, before I finally understood one truth. You don't have anything special toward anyone. You decided Qingli was your lifesaver, but later when her child fell seriously ill, and she came begging for rare medicine, you refused. That medicine was scarce. You said once it was gone, there would be no more. That day I overheard you telling the eunuch those words, and my heart turned half cold. In the end I secretly had the medicine sent to Jiangnan. Dung Yuan closed his eyes, and finally admitted it. But in both lives, the person I loved most was you. Loving most is not the same as loving only, right? He gritted his teeth and grabbed my wrist. Jiao Jiao, come with me. You've only known Song Yanxian for a few days. I can hide you away, and help him arrange a better marriage, even better and more prestigious than the Jiang family. He won't suffer and won't be wronged. If mother doesn't agree, I'll wait until I ascend the throne, and change your identity. Then you will still be my Empress. No one will know, no one will talk. A chill rose in my heart. In his obsession he had gone mad. You're insane. He didn't refute it and smiled terrifyingly. I can let you be angry at me, hate me, even if you resent me. As Dung Yuan spoke he stepped closer. But you have always been kind-hearted. As long as I treat you well day after day, year after year, you will eventually forgive me. We didn't have time to say anything, or even think about it. In that instant he reached out again. I casually pulled the hairpin from my hair and stabbed fiercely. The hairpin pierced through his palm. He lowered his hand and stared at it, his eyes full of disbelief. Do you still think I'm soft-hearted now? Familiar footsteps sounded behind me. Song Yanxian stepped into the room. Seeing Dung Yuan standing there quietly, he glanced at the other man's hand, then looked at me with worried eyes. He strode forward, opened his arms, and gently pulled me into his embrace. Did you suffer any grievance? I waved my hand lightly. It's tolerable. Only then did Song Yanxian raise his eyes, and look coldly at Dung Yuan. Your Highness the Crown Prince, it's getting late. This subject and my family still have some private matters to handle. We will not be entertaining you for the meal today. Dung Yuan let his arm drop. Blood dripped from his fingertips, onto the ground drop by drop. A meddler who appeared halfway. On what basis do you get to possess her? Song Yanxian looked straight into his eyes, without the slightest fear. On the basis that I give my whole heart and soul. In this life, in my eyes there is only Jiao Jiao. At that moment, the eunuch's voice suddenly came from outside, perfectly cutting off Dung Yuan's madness. Your Highness the Crown Prince, Her Majesty the Empress summons you to return immediately. His Majesty is waiting in the Imperial study. All the other princes have already arrived. The Empress summoned me into the palace again. This time my mood was completely different. In the previous life I was returning home. This time I was a guest. The Empress sat above and evaluated me for a moment. Her gaze paused briefly on my neatly coiffed married woman's bun, a complicated emotion flashing in her eyes. I know the Crown Prince has been looking for you recently. I lowered my head and waited quietly for her to continue. I originally intended to fulfill his wish completely, but when I investigated I discovered you had already married. And to the grandson of the Grand Tutor, this year's new top scholar. She sighed. I found a substitute, wanting to deceive him into thinking the lifesaver from that year was someone else, so he could completely give up. But who could have expected he would still see through it? This child never cares about other things, but on this matter he calculates in such a strange way. Her deep eyes looked at me. He is the future emperor. He absolutely cannot have the stain of stealing a minister's wife, nor can he make his majesty uncomfortable. As his mother I had no choice but to plan for him. I bowed slightly. Your Majesty, rest assured, this subject and His Highness the Crown Prince have always been clear and innocent. We have never done anything improper. The Empress waved her hand. I don't doubt you. It's just that, when young people love deeply, even if they don't end up together it becomes an indelible mark in the heart, that can't be wiped away, or thrown out. I don't want him to feel pain, and regret every time he remembers you in the future. She seemed to recall something, and suddenly changed her tone. That's right. Grand Tutor Song told His Majesty today that he wants to return to Bianzhou to take up office. The Grand Tutor is in his hometown. He refuses to stay in the capital and wants to return to fulfill filial piety. His Majesty has already agreed. I was stunned. In my previous life Song Yanxian had stayed in the capital. He performed excellently as a compiler in the Hanlin Academy and was promoted to reader several years in a row. After that his official career was smooth. The capital was where he could fully display his talents. Bianzhou was not bad, but ultimately couldn't compare to the capital. He had studied the sage's books bitterly for so many years. Was it only to return to Bianzhou? The Empress noticed my expression, and said gently, Grand Tutor Song is a man with his own ideas. Go home and advise him well. there may still be room to change things. I thanked her and left the palace, heading home the whole way. When I returned to the residence, from afar I saw servants carrying luggage back and forth. In the courtyard several large wooden chests stood open, as people packed things inside. Song Yanxian stood in the corridor checking each item one by one. I walked up behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist, and buried my face against his back. Why did you decide to return to Binzhou? He turned around, and looked at me gently and attentively. Grandfather's health isn't very good. The elders are all in Binzhou. Besides, aren't my wife's relatives also in Binzhou? I was stunned. When we entered the capital I had seen you secretly shedding tears. He had noticed after all. That night I sat alone by the window thinking about parting with my parents, not knowing how long it would be before we could meet again. Thinking of Qingli, who had just gotten engaged, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to attend her wedding. Thinking of my nephew Sunner at my sister-in-law's, the next time we met he probably wouldn't recognize me anymore. Thinking and thinking, 2 lines of tears fell. I thought no one had noticed, but he had seen everything. How could I not make any achievements at all? Song Yanxian smiled softly. Binzhou has its own advantages. My wife, rest assured. I definitely won't let you suffer. My nose stung. I held back the tears in my eyes. Binzhou it is. Wherever he is, that is home. On the day we left the city, the sky had just brightened. As soon as the gates opened, the carriage slowly rolled out. Suddenly the sound of galloping hooves came from behind. A fiery red horse charged out from the city gate. Deng Yuan reined in his horse, blocking the carriage. Jiao Jiao, I forbid you from leaving. I didn't lift the curtain. Your Highness the Crown Prince, I truly miss my hometown. My hometown has my parents and elders, my blood brothers and sisters. I want to go home to take care of my parents and fulfill my duty as a child. Deng Yuan immediately dismounted and rushed to the front of the carriage, pleading bitterly. Can you stay? I swear I will absolutely never make things difficult for Song Yanxian in the future. I will never bury his talent. I turned to look at Song Yanxian sitting beside me. There was no anger in his eyes. Husband, may I get down and speak a few words with His Highness the Crown Prince? All right. He helped tidy the stray hair by my ear. Go on, I'll wait for you. I lifted the curtain and stepped down from the carriage. Joy appeared on Deng Yuan's face. Jiao Jiao, come back to the city with me. Your Highness the Crown Prince, in your previous life you were a good emperor. In this life, do you want to become foolish ruler recorded in the history books for future generations to criticize and curse? He was stunned. In your previous life you did extremely well. The officialdom was clean, the people were happy, and the borders were peaceful. In handling affairs you were never muddle-headed. And never disappointed the common people. In this life I also believe in you. I believe you will be a good ruler. I believe you will not take private revenge. I believe you will not target a truly capable and good official just because you cannot let go. Deng Yuan's eyes reddened. Suddenly he shouted towards Song Yanxian inside the carriage curtain. Song Yanxian. Official positions, power, everything you desire, I can grant you all of it. Isn't that what you worked hard for all these years? The chance to display your grand ambitions, I am giving you that opportunity right now. As long as you, the curtain lifted. Song Yanxian stepped down from the carriage and stood firmly beside me, looking straight into Deng Yuan's eyes without retreating an inch. Your Highness, the world will belong to you in the future. Whom you promote or do not promote is entirely up to your arrangements. Not using me is your loss, not mine. Deng Yuan's shoulders slumped instantly. He muttered in a low voice, you can even throw away the official position you earned through years of bitter study and hard work. Is this what it means to love someone? I cannot summon even the slightest bit of sympathy for him. His face was faintly pale. Whenever we meet, there will inevitably be resentment in my heart. I cannot gamble on that possibility. I don't want the peaceful life I finally obtained, after so much hardship, to be disrupted, because of that possibility. I once thought of using the life-saving grace as bait, hoping that in the future he would treat my husband fairly, and give him extra care. But after thinking about it for a long time, that action would instead seem like I doubted his character. In your previous life you were a good emperor. In this life I firmly believe you still will be. But if you insist on forcing me to stay, the final outcome for me, and you will only be mutual destruction. Deng Yuan suppressed endless resentment, and squeezed out one word, through gritted teeth, with all his strength. Fine. I said nothing more, bowed to him, then turned and got back, into the carriage. When I returned home I happened to catch Qing Li's wedding. Red silk hung everywhere, gongs and drums sounded. She sat at the head of the bed in bright red wedding clothes, her eyes red as she said, Elder sister, you came at just the right time. I was afraid you would miss it. I smiled and said, even if I was late I would have rushed over. She burst into laughter upon hearing that. 1 year later I gave birth to my first child, a tiny baby girl. Her cry was so loud it startled people. When she grew a little she became mischievous like a wild monkey, climbing trees and chasing dogs. There was almost nothing she wouldn't do. Every time Song Yanxian came home and saw this little monkey he would suck in a cold breath. Later we had another son. He was obedient and sensible, cried very little, and perfectly complemented Shinner's personality. I thought this was a good sign, and everything would be fine, but after that my belly never reacted again. For the next 3 years I never got pregnant again. I secretly consulted a doctor. The doctor said my body was healthy, with no problems. Qing Li, on the other hand, was like in my previous life, giving birth one after another without stopping. In 3 years she had 2, in 5 years 3. Her children formed a lively crowd. I always felt I had no blessing, and secretly felt sad for a long time. Until one day I accidentally overheard Song Yenxian asking the pharmacy for contraceptive medicine. He was afraid I would be angry, and knelt right in front of the children in panic. "My wife, it's all my fault. Please don't be angry. I just didn't want you to suffer the pain of childbirth again. When you gave birth to Shuai, you were in pain for a whole day and night. I was outside listening to your miserable cries, and felt like my soul was about to leave my body. When you gave birth to Zhonger, it was a bit faster, but after the child was born you fainted, and no matter how we called you wouldn't wake up. I held your hand at that time and decided no matter what, we would not have any more." Song Yenxian's voice carried sobs. I was afraid that one day you would suddenly, how would I live? How would the children live? So I secretly had you take this medicine. It's my fault for not discussing it with you first. If you resent me, I accept it." He looked up at me in a daze. I said, "It's fine. No more children. One son and one daughter is really enough." He hugged me tightly, and cried even louder than the two children. In the peaceful years that followed, in the 13th year of Anning, Deng Yuan ascended the throne. For some reason, in this life his health was much worse than in the previous life. He secretly searched for famous doctors across the realm, not to treat his illness, but to concoct a medicine that could make a person forget someone. All medicine is 3 parts poison. After taking those medicines, he grew thinner day by day. Those medicines didn't help him forget the past. Instead, they hollowed out his body bit by bit. Song Yenxian governed Binzhou well and properly. He dug canals, led water, built irrigation, and encouraged farming. When the local people mentioned Lord Song, everyone gave a thumbs up. Strangely, his achievements topped the list every year. During every evaluation his colleagues were promoted again and again. Yet he remained in the position of prefect of Binzhou for 10 years, without ever leaving. In the blink of an eye 5 more years passed. When news of the new emperor's ascension reached Binzhou, it was already half a month later. The previous emperor had been bedridden, and ultimately could not survive that winter. Before his death he issued a final imperial decree, and sent it to Binzhou. The whole city was in an uproar. The decree said, the late emperor, remembering Song Yenxian's many years of outstanding achievements, and his talent, and virtue, specially summons him to the capital, and appoints him as prime minister, entrusting him with the heavy responsibility of the state. Thus, in this life he finally helped me fulfill my wish. We would never meet again. Only after the dragon returned to heaven did he leave behind that decree promoting Song Yenxian to prime minister in the capital, ultimately not failing a good minister.